Get going here. It is a little after 7 o'clock here on the East Coast, and it is after midnight for our guests. So I want to be respectful of their time because they're missing out on some valuable sleep to do this. My name is Alex Brashears. I'm the admin for Hampton Roads Multifamily and More. And today we have Suzy and Michael. I'm going to let them do their intro, but basically, they are stationed overseas, military family. So I feel a lot of what they're feeling. They're stationed overseas, thousands of miles from property that they invest in here actively in the United States. So I thought they would be a perfect group to bring on and talk about remote investing, because something that COVID really kind of pushed forward, in my opinion, was the comfort level of investing remotely, no matter where you were. Before, I feel like before COVID, it was really a matter of, you had to see the property, you had to have, your eyes on it, you had to walk it yourself in order to get that comfort level. And obviously that's not the case, because these two lovely people are investing in multiple properties across the United States. And to my knowledge, they haven't set foot in any of them, but I could be wrong. But they do have boots on the ground, so don't make it sound like they're not doing their due diligence. But go ahead and take it away, and I'll let you do your introduction to the group.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much, Alex, for having us here. We're excited. So I'm just going to share the screen. Oops.
And if anybody has any questions that they can think of, you can either unmute yourself and ask, or you can go ahead and put them in the chat. And if you feel like you would like to just ask without kind of being identified, you can always send me a message in the chat as well.
Can you see our screen?
We can.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, so we are the Adventurous real estate investors. And we just hope, that this brings light to being able to invest in multifamily syndications from anywhere in the world. And we're just going to share a bit about our journey, as in really how we got started from the very beginning, and then what steps we took to take down our first deal. So this is just a quote that we truly think have stuck to us throughout this journey. And it's just a Zig Ziglar quote. And you can get everything in life you want if you will just help enough people get what they want. And that's truly just how we feel with multifamily investing. It really is a team sport. But with that too, the education, because that's one of the biggest parts of our entire journey, is really just what we want to bring focus to, is that all of the education that we got, whether that was through podcasts and education or through other people during meetups and conferences, that is really, really, really what helped us grow. Mm-hmm. And then who we are. So besides the small paragraph, Michael and I go off of that we are an adventurous team. And before we just get into some introductions about each other, the reason we chose Adventurous real estate investors is just because it really embodies who we are. So because branding is such a huge thing, I mean, just in general, right? When Michael and I were thinking about the name that we wanted, adventure just kept coming up over and over and over. And we really didn't just want to be a capital group, and that was just our opinion, but we wanted to be something that stood out and thought who we were. And because Michael and I just love going on adventures, pretty much everything is an adventure to us. That is how we ended up with the name. But I will let Michael go into a introduction about himself.
Yeah, hey everybody, Michael Barnhart here. As Suzy mentioned, so I am actually currently active duty Air Force, and that's kind of why we're over here in England right now. We are in Cambridge, England, which is about an hour north of London. So I have a different military career compared to most, and the reason why I say different is because the last several years of my career here, I've actually spent, before coming here, I was at the Air Force Academy teaching molecular methods and genetics at the Air Force Academy. And so they want me to continue teaching, so they sent me to get a PhD, and that's why we're here in Cambridge, and I'm working on a PhD now. I've got a little over a year left now, and then we will head back to Colorado, where I'll continue teaching and finish out my military career there, is the plan. So yeah, the Air Force is taking care of me on the back end of my career, and I should be wrapping up a 20-year career here shortly, with just one more tour of teaching. So looking forward to that for sure. Suzy?
Yeah, and then I'm Suzy. So really, like, my background is that, like, and I can kind of go a little further back. So my undergrad is in anthropology and communication studies, but once I graduated, I had no idea what I was going to do with that. So I ended up in accounting. And if you just got to know me a little better, I guess you'd find through time that, like, accounting doesn't really fit my soul. The numbers part does. It just wasn't what a traditional accounting role does. And so with that, I decided to go get an MBA. And through my MBA, I just hoped to, like, have that career change, whether that was to, like, learn about different avenues or just meet, new people who I guess would help me grow into my journey. And one, I guess, industry that I found out I really, really loved was supply chain. And so I am now a program manager in the supply chain department for a biotech company over here. And I just really love how, like, everything comes full circle with supply chain. So, like, how you literally start with a raw material and end up with a product, because that can be used for everything in the world. And I love it now because I can truly see that parallel with real estate investing. And what I also love, actually about real estate investing is that as a military spouse, this career can travel with me no matter where we move. And that's actually the most important part, because when we moved here, I probably applied to, like, over 50 jobs, and it was just really, like, heartbreaking, to not have a job. I had literally no, as we were moving, I got my MBA, like, went back for graduation. And, so, like, after you put in that hard work, it's just like, okay, well, what now? If I don't get to use this, like, what was the point? Just because with people in general, like, a huge part of their identity is what they do for work. But just, like, through this entire journey, I found that, like, my traditional 9 to 5 actually does not create an identity for myself. There's so much more. But to transition then now into our real estate journey, we are going to talk a bit about that. And so our journey actually started because of COVID-19 and the lockdowns. So over here, when we were first put into lockdown, the government essentially said, like, hey, if you can't work from home, you're just going to be at home, and let's hope for the best, essentially. And so all we could do was leave once a day to go work out or go to the grocery store or the pharmacy. So with that, we had a lot of time on our hands. Granted, Michael could, like, work on his dissertation, but again, we had no idea, or his first year report, but we had no idea how long we were going to be in it. So once he was done with that, it was like, okay, well, what now, And I had yet to start my, like, traditional 9 to 5. So it's like, okay, cool. We have a lot of time and we don't have a TV. So what we decided to do was we started a mini book club. And so that is why there are 3 books on the screen. So the first one we started with was The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. And what that book did was pretty much talk about, like, the compounding effect of, like, being 1% better every day or doing 1% more every day. And at the back of his book, he had a wonderful reading list. And we're like, okay, well, if we have this reading list and Michael and I are going to do a mini book club together, like, just with the 2 of us, we should just keep reading the books that he has. So just to go down the line, it was Think and Grow Rich, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Start with Why, and then Multiple Streams of Income. And the Multiple Streams of Income book is really what did it, all. So a couple chapters into that book, Robert Allen starts to talk about real estate investing. Like, Michael got to that chapter and essentially was like, hey, please just skip all the chapters. Let's just go straight to this one. Like, this is something we have to try. And so after I read it, I was just like, okay, like, let's do it. We don't know how long we're going to be in this lockdown. So we might as well, find something to do. And even with that now, right? So like the first day we went into lockdown was March 23rd of 2020. And even now, we are essentially still in our third lockdown. Yes, the restrictions are a bit different, but there are still plenty of restrictions over here. So like throughout this entire, year and 3 months, we have had a lot of time to focus on the business. And so like a first big question is finding partners, right? Like, how do you find partners when you're virtual? How do you find partners in general? Like, because that whole know, like, and trust factor is not only with investors, it's with your partners as well. You don't want to just get in like awkward situations for 5 to 7 years or whatever your hold period is to be, I guess, stuck with somebody that you found out that is somebody you don't want to work with. But like through the journey of going to meetups and going to conferences and, just getting all of that information. One of the conferences that we went to, because in 2020, we probably went to 9 or 10 conferences and, like just absorbed as much as we could. And in one of those conferences, somebody said like, okay, you need to be putting yourself out on all of the platforms. Like you need to have that identity shift because people know like Michael as Air Force and they knew me at the time as business. And so nobody knew us as real estate investors, right? Like, yes, people in the meetups did, but that was all. Like, and it just goes so much further. So actually, one of the very first ways that we found our first partner, which I know Alex touched on this, is our boots on the ground. And so what we did was that we posted on social media about getting to real estate investing and like what that meant and what that was. And one of Michael's classmates from the Air Force Academy reached out to him. And I'm actually going to let him continue that story because it is very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So just by posting on social media, like Suzy had mentioned, one of my classmates from the academy reached out and he's like, hey, I'm in real estate full time. Just transitioned out of the Air Force actually. And I'm also interested in going into multifamily like you're posting about. And so we had a chat and see to make sure that our goals and vision kind of aligned. And from there, that's kind of where we developed our boots on the ground partner. So he was in a market that we already analyzed and we enjoyed, and that was Oklahoma City. And then the other market, of course, that we kind of focus on, and we'll get to that later, but is Tulsa, because Tulsa is only like an hour away from Oklahoma City, roughly. And so, yeah, anyways, we met our boots on the ground partner, and from there we just continued to grow and looking for deals at that point. And then we also continue to post and continue to attend meetups and networking events and things like that. And through that, we also met an organic mentor. So because we were attending all these meetups and conferences and things like that, and we were saying, hey, we're interested in Oklahoma City, Tulsa, and like telling people constantly over and over and over, like what markets we were interested in. One person was like, hey, I know somebody who's investing there, and made a soft introduction to him. And I met with this gentleman and I basically continued to just chat with him. We had a Zoom call together, and then we had several follow-up emails after that. And then I looked for a way. I knew I wanted to be where he was in however many years, right? So I knew that was a path, and I knew exactly like this is a person I want to mimic because he's very successful. He has assets all in Tulsa, in the specific submarkets that we were interested in as well, in Tulsa. And so I basically found ways to add value to him, specifically because of my background in teaching. I saw that he was actually putting together a education course on his website. So I was able to provide him with like course design, course structure, things like that, things that work in order to build the correct course outline for his website. So I was able to provide that information for him. And he was very appreciative, of course, of that. And from there, like we continued to chat more and more. And then he noticed that we were very dedicated. And we every single week underwriting properties. And so because of that dedication, he's like, hey, let's meet like once a week on a Saturday, and we can just chat about your underwriting. I can look over your underwriting, and then you can ask me any questions you have. So like, it just developed in a really amazing relationship. And to this day, like, yeah, we still chat like every day, basically via text or whatever.
Yeah, and so with that, like there is true power, right? So like posting on social media just to do that identity change, going to meetups and conferences, like that's how we had that introduction to our like organic mentors. So like something to even think about when you're attending these meetup conferences is what are you looking for? Like, are you looking for the education part, or are you looking to network? Because we have attended conferences where there is no networking, right? And like if you are wanting to meet people, like just kind of think outside of the box on how to do that. So something that we did, like if the networking component was not as strong as we wanted it to be, like if there was an opportunity to see everybody who was there, like we just started reaching out on LinkedIn, right? Like we took a screenshot, got their names, and would reach out on LinkedIn and say like, hey, I saw that you are attending this conference. Like, what do you think of it so far? Who is your favorite speaker been? And that was amazing within itself, because through that, like you meet people that you would not have normally met. Because I know there's so many meetups that you could possibly go to. But like even at the beginning, what I did is that I like tried 2 or 3 new meetups every week just to see like which ones stuck and which ones didn't. So at some point I was going to meetups just like all over the country. And granted, we're still doing that now, but like just to see which ones truly work and which ones you vibe with. And then just to go along with mastermind groups, there are ones that aren't super expensive and there are ones that are very expensive. And like you don't have to join one to succeed, right? But like the main thing about the mastermind groups is just find groups that align with your values, because that's really where you will succeed the most. And then just to cover a bit of our investment criteria, because this is what helped us choose a market, right? So like when you know what you're looking for from the beginning, it's way easier than to find a market that provides that, instead of thinking that there is a market that you want and then figuring out your investment criteria then.
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest thing is you need to understand what you're comfortable investing in. And then you also need to understand like what your investors are comfortable investing in and what a majority of your investors are interested in. And so our investment criteria kind of spawned from that combination of the two, like what we were interested in investing in and what our investors were interested in investing in. So we have an entire investment thesis on our website, but these are like 3 main things that we look for in every single deal. So the first one is that it has to be cash flowing from day one. And the second one is that it has to be 90% stabilized. That means it is 90%, it's just a stabilized asset. So it's 90% occupied for at least 90 days. That allows you to obtain long-term financing at low rates, whether that's agency debt, or even some very competitive bank loans, local bank loans. And then additionally, the third thing we kind of look for in every single deal is that 40 to 50% of the returns come from cash flow. And so that really allows us to focus in on, not ensuring our underwriting, number one, and the deal doesn't bank completely on appreciation, and it's more driven by the cash flow aspect of the deal.
Yes. And, like having cash flow versus appreciation is really just a personal choice. This was just one that we liked the most. And like when we were talking to our investors, just like a majority of them were also wanting cash flow at this time. And so your investment criteria can change and grow just as your business does. But for the moment and from the beginning, this is what we chose to go with.
Mm-hmm.
And property management company. So the reason we have a dedicated slide to this is just because like our property manager is from our team from the very beginning. So like now that we have a market and now that we have like been posting and finding people to create the general partnership team, it was then time to figure out our property management company. And the reason it is so important to us is because like I have just been in so many, like asset management meetings where like a big bottleneck is the property management company, whether you don't see issues the right way or things are not getting complete. And so because, like we're even in a different country, having a property management company like that we truly could trust, that we were vibing with, that understood our values, that were not just saying yes to everything on the business plan. That's really what we were searching for. So like, how do you find these great ones, right? I know that's an answer or a question for everyone. But so like at the beginning, what we did was that we joined social media groups and found forums in the market and just asked for referrals. And even now, like when we talk to new brokers in Tulsa or Oklahoma City, all of them, or not all of them, I'm going to have to say majority of them refer us or asked if we are working with Winfield Living with Amy Bors. And because she just stands out so much to the community, and that's phenomenal with itself. But like at the beginning, we didn't find her. She was not the first company that we reached out to. And so through that, we just had a lot of interviews. We had 4 interviews with different property management companies actually before we even found Amy. And so once we got to Amy, which was through an introduction, actually, we just knew right away. Just like everything that she stood for, like when we talked about, I guess, like essentially our vivid vision, like she was right there with it. And so that was really a great part. But the reason we also truly love, I guess, having a property management company as part of our team from the very beginning is that before submitting the LOI, like we will discuss the business plan with Amy and her team to ensure that the business plan is actually achievable. Because she's in the area, she knows the submarkets, she knows what's happening, like even with rents day in and day out, like she will know before we do. Yes, like we are subscribed to Tulsa Alerts and like their news and follow the mayor and stuff on LinkedIn, but we're not directly in the community. And so just being able to talk to her to make sure everything is achievable is great. But what was also great is that she would say like, no, I don't think this will work at this time. Like, so this isn't something you should bank on in year 1. This is something that should be moved. And so that was just phenomenal within itself.
Yeah, just to add to that, as Suzy was kind of mentioning, we will not submit an LOI before we talk and run everything through Amy, our property management company. And it just because a lot of people will get a deal under contract and then you find out that they're backtracking and okay, now we got to find a property management that fits this. And like, you're scrambling to do that, right? Like, in my opinion, this is my opinion, we will never submit an LOI without actually consulting our property management company, because the asset management of a property begins before submitting an LOI by having those discussions with your property management company. So we will never submit an LOI without a blessing from our property management company. Additionally, we actually are struggling to move to a different market to get increased deal flow and things like that, because we know how important the property management company is. We actually will not move a market until we identified a property management company that is equal or even better than Winfield, which it's hard to come by. So once we identify that in another market, then and only then will we actually start looking at deals in that market. So we won't move to another market until we actually identified a property management company in that market first.
And then I know that we covered like to mentor, not to mentor a little bit, or we talked about how we found our mentor, but this in itself truly deserves its own side, just because again, like so many people are like, do I need a mentor? Like, do you go paid or do you go organic? And so these are just a little, I guess, tidbits that we picked up along the way. And like I said, like you don't have to have a paid mentor. Like you can have an organic one and it'll work and it'll just go through introductions. But so with that, like even paid or organic, right? Just like find a way to find common ground. So like, are you in the same market? Do your values align? Like, do they have the knowledge in the areas you want to learn and excel at? Because like, just from what we've seen, right? If we were to have a mentor who, like, say lived in Washington, but was investing in Florida and we're investing in Tulsa, like, yes, they will help to an extent, but like, how will they actually be able to look over our underwriting and say like, oh yes, these numbers work in this area, you know, like, and that's really what we needed again, because we are so far away. Like, yes, we have a boots on the ground, but like we were also new at this. And so we needed like that extra confidence boost. And so knowing that that individual was there, because he doesn't just look over our underwriting, right? Like he can like look over the increases year by year. He can help with those introductions and referrals, you know, like
Different vendors.
yeah, and different vendors. Thank you. And so like if you do happen to come, oh, like if you do come to be in that situation where you're like, okay, I really like this individual that I've been speaking with, like who is in your market, like do not be afraid to ask, like, because you really won't know if they will or if they won't, right? So like Michael had mentioned how he was providing value, like just find a way to add value to your mentor's life, essentially, or his business or her business, just because like all of us are in this journey, right? To like get more time. And so like to ask an individual to like take away some of their time to help you is huge. So like just make sure that you have truly thought about how you can add value. And even if you have and you don't know, like that's something you can also ask, like, hey, I would love to provide value to you. Like, what do you need right now? Because like a lot of people are asking in the space, like, what can I do for you right now? What do you need right now? And sometimes just being asked that question will like awaken, you know, a spirit essentially almost, and be like, hey, actually, there is something that I would need help with. Because, you know, like in this journey, we're here to work on our business and not in our business. So like anything or anyone that can alleviate like you from not working on those essentially like $10,000 ideas will help them immensely. So you can definitely just think of it that way. And with that, you know, like capital raising is a huge, huge part. So even to like go off of our capital raising experience, what we did, because once we were in the meetups and in the conferences, everybody said to us, like, you should have started capital raising yesterday. We're like, shoot, cool. So we have some makeup work to do. And so for a while, we were having 20 to 25 investor calls a week, right? Because we didn't want the reason that like our growth what stalled essentially was because we couldn't raise capital. And that's just huge in itself. So like something that we learned in a conference was that about 10% of your list will invest.
In your first deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we knew that if we were going to raise $500,000 or bring $500,000 to a deal, then we needed at least 100 people on our list. If the investment was $50K minimum, 10% of our list, we had 10 people. 10 times 50 is 500,000, right? So we knew we needed to have a list that was at least 100 people big in order to raise the capital that we knew we needed to raise. So with that, moving forward, once we had that list kind of built, or we were building that list, then we kind of understood, okay, this is how much capital we think we can raise. This is the size deal we think we can actually take down.
Yeah, and like from the beginning, we found out right away that like our friends and family were not going to be investing with us. And a lot of people have that situation also. And a lot of people actually just can work off their friends and family list for quite a bit of time. And so that's when we had to put it in overdrive and have like those 20 to 25 calls a week, just because our deals we knew were going to be 506Bs. And so you had to have that pre-existing relationship. And So that's why we started getting on all of the calls with everybody, you know, to like figure out what their real estate investing goals was. And actually a lot of the first people who even invested with us were also real estate investors that we had met, you know, through the meetups and conferences, just because like they already truly understand the value of real estate investing. It was not something where we had to convince them like how valuable it was. But even with this, like the picture over here is a picture of like an automation that we have in our email. And it's just like super important because you need those multiple touch points, especially if you're going to be doing a lot of this virtual, because like, as even Alex mentioned at the beginning, like we have yet to even see our assets, like Michael and I see our assets in person just because of all the COVID restrictions. But even with that, like, it would be cool to be able to meet all of our investors in person one day, but who knows if that'll happen because they are just spread out through so many different states now that that could just possibly not be feasible. And so like, how do you get those touch points and like, who are you actually trying to attract? And so like your person, like attract your dream hero. And like, just what I mean by that is like, everybody wants to be the hero of their own story, right? So like, we are going to help them by presenting them with a guide, but like throughout this whole entire journey, right? Like even as entrepreneurs to their core, like we problem solve, we figure out solutions to majority of the issues. So like how can somebody be their own hero and feel like they have taken the initiative to do this on their own? So like with your lead magnet, right? Because like that's the biggest part. Like, how are you attracting people? Are you attracting them through webinars? Are you attracting them through blog posts? Are you attracting them through a guide? Just like, how are you trying to get people to learn more about who you are? So like create content for those people and their problems. Cause like, that's again, the thing, like what problems are we trying to help them solve? You know, for some people it's creating generational wealth. For some people, it is that they want the cost segregation so that they can have tax write-offs. You know, a lot of people, it's the time freedom. So like, what problem are you trying to solve and how are you doing it with the individual that you're trying to go after? And so like the actions to avoid failure and create success is just to create those multiple touch points. And like, so through even the photo again, like that's our email sequence. So like, how will you help them avoid failure? And like for us specifically, right, because we're in multifamily syndications, like it's like, how can we help these individuals have more time to create an impact on other people's lives? Or how can we create more time for people to go on more adventures? So like through our email sequence, it's not like they just meet us and then we hope they go to our website, right? Because everybody knows that like getting somebody's email is like one of the most valuable resources that you can get from an individual. So like once we chat with them, they get an email and then they go like a thank you email, and then they go through a sequence to learn more about who we are so that they can see our business plan and see deals that we've taken down and what we truly are about at our core. Because even in like the allotted half hour, only so much can be said, but even within an hour, only so much can be said. But the email sequence, because I know, you know, like some people might want to stay on calls to like cover all of that, but like now you have a paper trail and now you actually get more time back, right? So instead of having a lot of like 1 to 2 hour calls or even 1 to 2 every day, like you can have way more calls with way more people, just because like even when we started, some people were ready to invest. And by the time that we got a deal, they no longer were like needing to invest at that time. They either deployed their capital or I mean, that's essentially usually what it always is actually, is that they deployed their capital while waiting. And so just 2 books that really helped us like figure out our brand and how it's like ever changing and ever flowing, and then even how to raise capital, are Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. Just because that is really like, it puts, I guess, branding into a much easier perspective on like who we're going after, like what problem we're solving, how we're the guide to that problem, and then how we help them with success. But then for raising capital, it is Raising Capital for Real Estate by Hunter Thompson. And I mean, he just gets like so, I guess, real in this book that you can really identify with him just because of the struggles that he talks about. And he breaks down things so well to where people have actionable items and they have actionable steps in order to move forward. So those are two books that we definitely love and definitely recommend.
So the next thing we kind of want to discuss is like disengaging with brokers and submitting LOIs. So what we found to be very successful was, first of all, like identifying the top brokers in the area. So like what I actually did was go through Crexy and LoopNet and not look for properties on there, but look for the brokers that kept coming up over and over. Like, and then you realize that, okay, there's a couple brokers that are controlling most of the inventory in your specific market through those websites. And then you can get their contact information from these websites. And then what I would do, what I still do is I kind of send like a intro email. Well, now that I'm connected with most of the brokers and everything in Oklahoma City and Tulsa, but we send like an intro email saying, hey, I'm Michael, my team is Adventurous Real Estate Investors, and we are, multifamily syndicators. We own this many assets, whatever, in a specific area. Or if you don't have any assets at the time, just say, hey, I have this experience or whatever. But additionally, what I would do is like not only share our criteria, but also I wrote like a cover letter that would have my information, Suzy's information, all of our partners, and specifically like the vendors that we were working with, like a property management company, lenders that we were potentially going to work with, like insurance brokers, any of these like key players that you need to close on a deal, including them in the cover letter and a little bit of bio about them, right? And so if you don't have the experience initially to put down in the cover letter, any experience that you have in business would help, right? So with multifamily syndications, like I drew a parallel between my time in the Air Force as an acquisition officer. So I was acquiring chemical and biological defense systems for the Air Force, right? So I have that acquisition and then controlling that asset through production and then through its life cycle and then disposing of that asset at the end. So it's very similar to multifamily acquisitions as well. So I kind of drew those parallels between the two, which gave me a little bit more credibility, I think. Maybe not. But anyways, I would send that info to the broker with the cover letter, the email, and then that will allow them to at least engage initially and then allow you to, okay, I'm going to call this broker and they'll actually answer the phone and be able to chat with me one-on-one, right? They know I'm a serious buyer because I put together all this information and I have this experience. And at least they'll answer the phone when I call and we can have a one-on-one conversation at that point. So, and then it's just continually checking in with them. Once you find a couple brokers, there's a couple brokers that I kind of align with and I like their values and things like that, even though sometimes you'll know like there's some brokers who are really try to push the amount that a property is worth and things like that. And so what I actually end up doing, or what I did, was actually identify a couple of brokers that I'm really good and close friends with now, and just calling them constantly and like following up with them, and really seeing how I can provide value to our relationship, and not even really asking for properties at that point, right? Just like calling and chatting with them, whether that be about soccer, or like I had a long conversation with a broker last night. And we just chatted about traveling to the Northeast and how flights to the Northeast are challenging, right? So just little conversations that have nothing to do with real estate at all, but it keeps you top of mind, right? So
yeah, and like the reason then the last point is capital, and why we had capital even as a slide before engaging with brokers and submitting LOIs is because like before you submit LOIs, you want to make sure that you can actually bring the right amount of capital. But how do you know how much capital you can actually bring if it's your first time, right? So like between you and your team, like when I say your team, I meant like Michael and I and Adventurous real estate investors, but then other people on our GP team, like check in with them and ask why they think they can raise the amount of money they can raise, right? Because for some people, like when they engage with somebody for the first time, they could potentially not talk to them again for 9 months to a year. And so you actually don't know if they're ready to like deploy capital again. So it's just like do those quarterly surveys. And that's actually really helped us. And the surveys are usually just like 4 or 5 questions long, right? Like asking how much they want to invest, what their investing timeline is. I mean, we even asked, so that wasn't just all focused around capital, is like what other content they are wanting to see from us, you know, whether that is through our podcast. Well, at the time it was blog posts, but now we could talk about it through our podcast and our YouTube channel, right? Because we want to make sure that the emails that we send are emails that they want to open. So like we want to serve them in the best way that they can. But so yes, like just check in with your team members and understand how they got to their number so that when you go to raise capital, it isn't a situation where somebody commits to $500,000 but potentially cannot even bring $100,000.
Yeah.
And so from there, now we're going to go into closing, just because like what I mean by closing is pretty much that your like purchase and sale agreement has been executed and then everything through there, right? Because it is like nonstop. It is like you get calls whenever somebody needs to call you. You get paperwork at all hours of the day just because there's so much to do. There's so many questions to answer. So it is go, 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 go. But like some problems that we specifically have had towards the end of our like closing journey that really just stuck out to us was like, especially being overseas. I mean, actually for our first closing, we were even just in the States. So this could happen no matter where you are in the world, essentially, but like give yourself enough time for any problems that you could have with the notary or with the overnight delivery. So for our first closing, that was around the same time, or was the same exact time that Texas had that huge like snow and ice storm. So a partner who lives in Texas actually could not even get a mobile notary to come to him. He had to go to the mobile notary to get his documents signed. But like at that time too, mail was like not as fast as it usually is. So I know like with weather situations, that truly is out of your control, but like make sure you scan the documents and you have a scanned version for yourself so that you can send, you know, that to title or to the lender, just so they also know it's on the way. Just try to think of different ways to alleviate a problem. Like another problem that we even went into is that the lender's attorney sent us one shipping label for everybody on our team. So a lot of our documents actually got stuck at like a holding location. And when we went to look online, it said delivered. And the lender was like, no, we only have 2 docs. We're like, cool. So when we looked into that, that's when we found out everybody had the same shipping label, but that's not something that you ever think will happen, right? You're like, oh no, the attorney's got it all under control. Like this will work out. But like, again, like we are all humans and we all make mistakes. And that was definitely a mistake. But like just having that time even for that situation, right? Because then we had to rush out to another notary and another UPS or FedEx. I don't remember who we used, but we had to go to a different one just because like the initial one that we went to, we're like, we're closing, like we no longer sign documents right now. We're like, no, that can't happen, you know? And so just trying to find a different one, just like having plan Bs will always help you. And like even throughout the journey, right? Like as we mentioned towards the beginning, how we strongly believe in having our like property management company as part of our team from the beginning. Like have that first meeting in place with your property management company, like in the diary or in your schedule calendar. And what that does is that you have a plan in place for takeover. So like, yes, although this was all happening to us like a day or two before takeover, we knew that on day one, like our property management company would be there ready to go to implement the business plan. And no, I don't mean like, oh, we're going to go in and start to charge rents right away. It's like, oh no, we are going to go in and establish relationships with the resident right away, right? Because like having a new property management come in is very disruptive, whether we'd like to think so or not, it is. And so we want to make sure that that transition is not only smooth for our property management company, but also smooth for all of the residents living at this community. But then to go on to the next slide. So just to bring it all together, right? So like something that is big with Michael and I is that we focus on a different ROI, which is return on impact. So like in our business plan itself, like beyond the traditional in-unit renovations, we ask ourselves like, what can we do to truly create an impact on the residents? Just because like real estate investing can be a huge tool to be able to create like that beautiful impact on so many people, right? So like there are almost 8 billion people on this earth. So think about how fantastic it would be if like all of us even did something towards somebody else, like a positive impact that was like 1%. So a very small impact, like that ripple effect is huge. And so for our residents, like for our first asset that we took down, just because, so through all this journey, right? Like we started, I guess, everything in February of 2020. As of February of 2021, we did take down our very first deal. It was an 88 unit in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But through that business plan, we were like, okay, well, like let's add in-unit washers and dryers, right? Just because like through COVID, even over here, a lot of them were closed, but if they weren't closed, it was like every other one was closed or yeah, at the laundromat. And like, that's devastating, right? So like on a regular day, just even from what I've experienced, like laundromats are very busy and you spend so much time there. So like even during a time of COVID, like adding those in-unit washers and dryers, one, gives so much people so much more, I guess, like safety, depending on like what their stance is on COVID, but so much more time. And that's really what we want to do, right? Like if we're in this journey to get more time freedom, how can we bring that on to the residents themselves? And there are a lot of ways to create impact, but that was like the biggest one for us. And like just moving forward too, we will always think like, how can we make the residents' lives better, right? Because like if they're in a community where they can think about thriving instead of surviving, like that ripple effect is huge. Like it happens with them, like they can put it onto their children or their spouse or their friends or their colleagues at work, you know, like your attitude completely changes when you no longer have to think about your basic needs. And because we can cover the basic need of shelter, like we want to make sure that this is a place where they feel safe and they want to stay, because really like the biggest compliment is resident retention, right? So like, how can we impact them in a way that they want to stay? You know, and even like some just additional features. So we are adding a ton of barbecues and like a fire pit, and we're going to make our pool area much more desirable. Like, and yes, that does not directly like bring amazing
revenue.
Yeah, another stream of sorry, where you say that?
Stream of income.
Yeah, another stream of income. I apologize. And so like, but we are wanting, like I said, the residents to stay, like, so how can we make it more desirable? So just the question, even like for this slide, is like, what impact do you want to make? Do you want to make an impact on yourself, on your family, you know, on in your community and communities around you?
Yeah, and finally, just to kind of wrap up here, I know Mason had some questions. I'll get to him here in a second. But the best way to get a hold of us is just through our website, adventurousrei.com/info. And there you'll be able to learn more about making impact. You'll be able to find our podcast, our YouTube channel, which actually launches July 1st. It's today.
It's like it's July 1st for us.
It's July 1st in England right now. Yeah, so tomorrow when you wake up, we were launching with like 48 videos ready to go and loaded. Specifically, we have a mini series on like acquiring your first property from pre-LOI all the way through closing and takeover. And we also have a mini series about asset management, just kind of going over like 10 tips, lessons that we've learned so far in asset management, as well as we'll have so we're actually releasing 3 videos a week. Our podcast video will be on Tuesdays. On Thursdays will be our, Suzy will be talking and doing like a little blog video, if you will, either about mindset or real estate. And then on Saturdays, I'll also have a video where either I sit down with somebody and have like a little fireside chat with them about real estate investing, or really diving into the weeds about specifics, what the difference between a 506C and a 506B is, or, ways to create additional income in multifamily investing. So that's the best way to reach out to us and find us. You can also at that adventurousri.com/info, you can like send us an email through there as well. And obviously our email address is listed here and our phone number. You feel free to text or call that number as well. But just to get to Mason's 3 questions real quick. He asked, what made you want to invest in Tulsa and Oklahoma? So we were looking for high cash flow markets. We know our investors were interested in cash flow, especially during the current economic situation. However long the government's going to prop up the corpse of the economy, we have no idea what's going to happen. So if there is like a downfall, we thought the best downturn protection would be cash flow, right? So not banking too much on appreciation. If all else fails, the market drops out, at least we still have a cash flowing asset where we can continue to give distributions to our investors. So Oklahoma Tulsa specifically has higher cap rates, which allows us to capitalize more on that cash flow aspect of the deal. Yeah, exactly. And so Mason also, basically said that finding property manager for the property. Yeah, absolutely. That's critical for sure. And then what platform do you use to manage your investor database? We use Active Campaign. So initially we were using like Podio for our CRM, and then also MailChimp. We quickly outgrew that, and we were really happy we made the switch because now we have like full range of various different automations that are available in Active Campaign, which really helps automate majority of the investor experience. Thank you. Yeah. MailChimp does have some automation stuff. It's just not as robust as Active Campaign. So find a platform that works best with you, but Active Campaign is that platform for us.
Very cool. Thank you so much for this. I know I learned something new, so I will definitely be reaching out to you and pick your brain about a couple those nuggets that you mentioned, like Mason brought up. Those are some great information. So I highly recommend reaching out to them, jump on a call, just learn a little bit more about them. Because as you can see, they obviously love to travel when it's not COVID out. So please reach out to them. And if you have any other questions, you can reach out to their email or their phone number. And again, I want to thank both of them for staying up super late because I know it's very, very late where you are. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. It's a pleasure being on here. If there's any more questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat, or like Alex says, just reach out to us via email.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Cool. Absolutely.